Welcome. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the CECC 2026 Community Energy Series, which has been funded by the Government of Canada's Low Carbon Economy Fund. So, most importantly, a thanks to Environment and Climate Change Canada for their support of their work. My name is Josie Ward, and I'm a project specialist for the CECC. And I know that my name on here says that I am Jody Conuel. That's just she owns the Zoom account, so I am Josie. But our names are close enough, anyways, that I will respond to either. All right. So before we begin, just a few quick housekeeping notes. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're joining from. It's really great to see the geographic spread of our participants. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A function at any time. We'll come back to the end of to address them at the end of the session. Within the Q&A function, you can also upvote questions. So that way we know which ones are the most important. And finally, just a reminder to everyone that participant microphones are disabled for this webinar. So please use the chat or Q&A if you wish to interact. And finally, this session is being recorded and it will be shared with registrants post-editing. So just be aware of that if you're writing in the chat. All right, and here's a quick overview with the agenda. We'll give you a brief introductions, and then we will turn to our presenter to discuss the work of the Canadian Coalition for Community Capital and explain how their proposals could unlock new investment opportunities for community-led projects. And then finally, we'll close with the Q&A session. And before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the lands we're joining from today. As a national organization, our presenters and participants are connecting from many different First Nations, Inuit, and Métis lands, Métis territories across Canada. We recognize and honor the Indigenous peoples who have cared for these lands and waters since time immemorial and who continue to hold deep relationships with them today. For us at Community Energy Cooperative Canada, this acknowledgement is also about responsibility. We are committed to building respectful relationships, supporting Indigenous leadership in community-owned renewable energy, and continuing to learn how our work can contribute to a more just and inclusive energy future. This is an ongoing journey, and we know there is always room to learn more. All right, and just to keep things moving, I'd like to give a brief introduction to Community Energy Cooperatives Canada, or CECC, for those of you who might be new to our organization. CECC is the national voice for renewable energy cooperatives and community-owned renewable energy in Canada. We believe communities should have the opportunity to own, benefit from, and shape their energy future. But building community-owned renewable energy is about much more than installing solar panels or wind turbines. Communities need knowledge, strong networks, access to financing, and supportive policy. That's where the CECC comes in. Our role is to help build those foundations by connecting people, sharing knowledge, advancing research, and advocating for the policies that will allow community energy to flourish. Across all our work, we're committed to supporting Indigenous-led renewable energy initiatives and building more resilient, inclusive, and community-powered energy systems. And finally, I would not be doing my job if I did not promote becoming a member of the CECC. Everything that we do at the CECC is made possible by a growing network of people and organizations who believe in the power of community-owned renewable energy. If you're not already a member, we invite you to join us. Membership is free and connects you with a national network, learning opportunities, and a chance to help shape the future of community energy in Canada. We offer 2 membership categories: supporter members for individuals and organizations who want to support our work, and community energy members for cooperatives and community organizations actively developing local renewable energy projects. Whether you're exploring community energy or already leading projects, we welcome you to becoming part of this growing movement. And now I would like to introduce our guest speaker today. Suzanne is a recent graduate of the University of Toronto's Master of Science in Planning. As a knowledge lead at Tapestry Community Capital, Suzanne researches community bonds and their application. In particular, Suzanne works to scale the use of community bonds by building awareness of the model through knowledge mobilization, translation, and generation. She also works to build the necessary partnerships to help support knowledge mobilization and generation. We are really excited. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Suzanne.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for showing up today on a Thursday afternoon. I'm going to share my screen, and I also have a fun photo that I'm excited to share. So without any further ado, here we are. And so thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure for me to actually join again the Community Energy Cooperative uh, Canada once again. And I'm going to explain why I'm saying once again. But I'll do a brief land acknowledgement myself. Like like Josie did an incredible job. But I think the one thing I will add is, community ownership of and community investment, which is a lot of the space where I'm coming from, into clean energy happens often on unceded territories, treaty lands, etc. And I myself am joining from Montreal, which is the unceded territory of the Mohawk peoples. And my hope and really the ambition that I have for our work is that the capital we raise and the projects that we steward in the end, hopefully advance Indigenous leadership, ownership, and benefit rather than just repeat the extractions of the past. So wherever we're all from, I like my hope as we build the co-op movement, of which I am a part, and the clean energy movement that we continue to build that into our work. So this is actually the first CECC meeting back in Ottawa in June of 2023, and you might recognize from this lovely blue vest that I am right at the front there because I was actually at this meeting. And so this is where I believe the census was the 2022 census on renewable energy cooperatives was released. There are a whole bunch of folks who might be on this call. So if you're going, hey, that person looks mildly familiar, this might be part of the reason why. So it's a great pleasure, as I mentioned, to be back. For some context, am no longer the knowledge lead at Tapestry. I am also, I actually got promoted and now I'm the policy and research manager at Tapestry Community Capital, meaning that I do a lot of our building of relationships with government and really building legislation and then implementation for said legislation. And we mostly do this through an organization we helped found, but are not the exclusive members of, called 4C, also known as the Canadian Coalition for Community Capital. Really the purpose of the organization is to organize the retail-focused community finance subsector into a cohesive voice that can better collaborate with the broader community finance sector. That's the sector that Tapestry is a part of. We develop policy frameworks that unlock what we call community capital and community finance at large, and we build relationships with government and other relevant partners. We are a 30+ network of organizations, including cooperatives like Solar Share, and housing cooperatives like Union Co-op, community bond issuers, intermediaries and other incubators, so like funds and technical assistance providers is what we mean there, and other allies. And just for some context, Tapestry itself is a nonprofit co-op, and we grew out of TREC, the Toronto Renewable Energy Cooperative, hence why I was there at that first meeting. And our connection to the CECC's policy priorities are actually quite tangible and recent. So as of 2 weeks ago, I was looking through the CECC's website. The CECC actually asked the Prime Minister to create pathways for local investment and benefit sharing. And 4C, the coalition, is championing policies around tax changes that can make this real. So I was looking through the pre-budget submissions that Community Energy Cooperative Canada actually did present, and while you folks are pushing other key changes like program eligibility and a community energy window within the Canada Strong Fund, we're pushing the tax rules that continue to better unlock private retail investment. And supporting this work is hopefully by the end of this presentation, it will be clear that it's complementary and not duplicative. So back to that census that I mentioned earlier, there are about, and you folks all know this, there are quite a few renewable energy co-ops nationwide, most of them focused on solar, and most of them are investment co-ops that are for-profit, etc. And kind of the thing that, as I was rereading that census a few days ago, the key barrier that was identified was not demand for renewable energy or the existence of member dollars, it was policy. And this is something that really resonates because this has been the equal challenge on the community investment, the broader community investment side, is that we actually need a ton of policy support. Um, and frankly, renewable energy is already raising capital. 90 million so far has been raised for renewable energy projects. And they actually demonstrate that investors do show up when there are clear projects, tangible returns, etc. But it also noted that, capital intensive projects, so wind, storage, often outgrow a small member base. And this is also true of our constituents who are housing co-ops. They are also finding that this is true. Getting investments into RSPs and TFSAs is needed to fundraise, but harder for some co-ops to achieve than others. And I find that this is usually a for-profit, nonprofit split, where for-profit cooperatives like OREC, etc., have bluntly told me, honestly, this is the part of the reason why we formed ourselves as a for-profit, but like, for example, SolarShare is a nonprofit co-op, and this continues to be a challenge, and it continues to be a challenge on the housing side as well. And once again, low returns make renewable energy investments hard to compete with conventional options. And last but not least, there was an entire piece around like the legal costs of setting up some of these things, but unfortunately, I don't know what kind of legislation will actually get lawyers to reduce their fees for a sector that they feel that they don't know very well. So that is something that I've been thinking about, but a lot of our policies actually really are meant to tackle these three things. So our five asks, we have five key asks that we've made to government. First, let co-ops raise beyond their membership. So there's a one line of the Income Tax Act that I've been asked to delete that basically says 90% of capital that a co-op raises has to come from its membership. So deleting that rule, getting investments into RSPs and TFSAs, especially when they are unsecured. Once again, not a challenge for the for-profit renewable energy co-ops, but certainly a challenge for some nonprofits and certainly beyond renewable energy. Third, a federal tax credit. So matching existing provincial precedents and making lower returns a little more competitive, a challenge across the board because we need the capital to also not just be, we're not just trying to raise capital, we need it to be right-sized and accessible to us, right? It's not just raise all the capital and be in massive amounts of debt. Extend a provision in the Income Tax Act that currently enables, so if you make a direct investment, so whether it's by acquiring a share of a private corporation or you lend capital into a private corporation right now into what's called a small business corporation under the Income Tax Act, you can, if you are unable to collect on that loan or the value of that share has fundamentally been so completely reduced that you, once again, cannot sell it, etc., because they've gone bankrupt, you can actually claim 50% of your investment, whether a loan or an equity investment, so a share, etc. You can claim 50% of that value against any income. So that includes capital gains, includes like employment income, etc. And so it's currently open to technically for-profit co-ops. So if you were a for-profit co-op and you did not know your investors could actually do that, they can. But we're saying like extend it to all co-ops, so nonprofits, nonprofit co-ops, nonprofits, and charities, and extend that provision up to 75%. And last but not least, fund and accredit community finance intermediaries that get things like community bonds onto the market or cooperative shares onto the market, etc. And also this would be for investment co-ops themselves. You could potentially get capital from this from this piece of the legislation. So all in all, it's meant to be how can we better protect investors? How can we better incentivize investors? How can we bring them in to the projects? And then also, how can we make sure that we are um, uh, like market building? Like it's not just let's bring in the investors, it's also how do we make sure that we have projects and deals in order to kind of do that. Uh, so this is like the fund and accredited community finance intermediaries from our end on the community investment side. And what I really like about CECC's pre-budget submission is that you're actually talking about the market building on the other side for renewable energy with some of the conversations around net metering, etc., which were also part of the 2022 census. So I, in in short, we have already taken these asks to Ottawa with a positive response. All three, like these first three, like one, two, and three, all have a cost. Sorry, actually, no, two, three, and four all have a cost, and number one actually doesn't have a cost to the government. And officials have told us, we've talked to the Department of Finance, we've talked to the Minister of Finance's office, and they're pretty happy with this package, and they've already told us that the first four of these make a ton of sense, etc. So I think the three things that kind of move the needle for renewable energy co-ops is the 90% rule. When I was reading the census again, it was like, how can we, like, you can win big contracts, but scramble for capital against a small member base. A federal tax credit helps just make low return rates that make projects more viable, a little more competitive. And for like anyone struggling on the nonprofit cooperative renewable energy side around registered account inclusion. And I think these three things will really move the needle for energy co-ops in terms of raising capital and bringing in a continuously accessible capital pool. Because retail investment, for what it's worth, and just to set some context, there's about $4 trillion worth of assets in 2024 in retail assets in Canada, hundreds of billions of dollars stored via registered accounts, etc. So being able to move some of that capital towards community priorities. And it's not just affordable housing. We also need capital for energy storage, renewable energy, grid updates. I can think of quite a few. We are going to need to rethink how we are accessing retail capital and how we continuously are expanding who can invest, and what protections they have, and how that money continues to be accessible to us. Um, and so we have a campaign. Where we're currently at with our policy advocacy work is we've done 4 rounds of meetings between October to June, with federal officials, as I mentioned, with the Minister of Finance's office, the Department of Finance. We've completed fiscal costing with positive results in all three scenarios because these are projections of what uptake could potentially be. So we modeled a low growth, a medium growth, and a high growth scenario. All of these policies end up paying for themselves with up to a $216 million net fiscal benefit to the government for implementation of just the first like 4 policies, right? Um, to the government. And that number is like a floor, not a ceiling. And I can also send the final economist report because this is third-party independent economist report that we got, so that way we could actually talk to government about what this will cost. And so why now? The fall 2026 budget decisions are being made right now. Our reception has been strong, but we can't really let up the pedal. Parliament has recessed, which means your MPs are home in your ridings. We want your MP, and in particular, if you have an MP who's part of the Liberal caucus, talking to the Minister of Finance. So we've created templates for MP support letters, MP meeting requests, and investor mobilization emails that are all ready to use. And they're also available in English and French. So if you are a renewable energy cooperative and you are a francophone renewable energy cooperative, you will not be left behind. We have created uh, two separate packages for that. And our campaign deadline is really by the end of Sept- by sorry, by the beginning of September. We want people meeting their MPs by Labor Day. So the sooner we can get this out is the better. We are working with GR support. So there are MP meetings. Our goal is to get 11 to 12 with investor letters to the Minister of Finance, numbering about 100 plus. I have a lot of movement on the investor letters. We've already got 15% of what we need. So that's actually pretty good for, which was more than I expected. And we don't, and I want to offer this because you do not have to do this alone. If this is the first time you are thinking about doing government relations work, is we can join your MP meeting if you need it. And our government relations partner will also prep you for your talking points and can help you coordinate timing, etc. And yeah, like, well, we can do it right now, but I actually know that there are a whole bunch of like comments taking place. And I want to maybe take some time for people to be able to ask me some questions about some of the things that I've just discussed around our policies, a little more about the coalition, should you need it, a little more about of like some of the fiscal costing that we've done. Because I think we actually have quite a bit of time remaining. It's only 2:30, so it's only 2:20 actually. So it'd be really like I'd be happy to, before you say yes, like let's get behind this and send out letters to your MP, like please feel free to ask plenty of questions, etc. Yeah, and I'd love to keep in touch. This is a short presentation, so that way you could ask me plenty of questions. Please feel free to keep in touch. And of course, this entire presentation will be made available to you. And because I'm based in Montreal, if whatever the end result of the fall budget ends up being, if you folks are going to be in Montreal, I'd love to see you because I do live here. So anyway, with all of that in mind, maybe I'll stop sharing because I can't see anyone's faces right now, and maybe we can go through any questions that are coming up as they stand. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. It was really great to hear about the campaign. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, we generally ask people to write their questions in the chat, but knowing with the amount of time we have and the amount of engagement I think we have on this subject, I think maybe we can if you raise your hand, similar to how Marc-Andre has at the moment, I could go ahead and unmute them and allow more of a discussion base to take.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Yep.
so Cody, I have allowed you to speak now, so if you can unmute or you can write in the chat, whatever your preference.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, this is kind of going back to some of the same stuff. It's just like in general, I find that sometimes we look at things that would be great from the community aspect, and all these sound really great, but there doesn't seem much in the sense of guardrails. And what I mean by that is regulators tend to look at it from the bad actors, not from the good actors type of thing. So when I think about, what you're trying to do, like just one quick thing I think of, which is not good, is you could almost create, like this open-ended community like tax credit where some people are going to be using their wealth and creating tax shelter and fake not profits to avoid income tax or things like this that could be going on. So I guess part of my discussion that comes up is just it sounds as though you're obviously open to some of these things, but I think about like the early fit days, and I wasn't around for them, but when I look back at it, it's like there was many people, they had to do different iterations of it because what was going on was large like corporations were coming in and building it and taking the capital and leaving. So just like I said, on this whole idea of guardrails, where are we be looking to go with that?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Cody. So for first, like the entire fit experience in Ontario was one that came up when I was in planning school and I was taking courses on co-ops and economic development, and the elite takeover that is potentially possible is something to watch for, and it's actually something that Finance Canada has already asked us about, right? Like the Department of Finance, because I'm working not just with policy advisors but also with the bureaucrats, have asked me, what are the guardrails around this? And so we have submitted a separate document called the Qualifying Community Capital Framework on who is eligible, what counts, what doesn't, what are some guardrails, and if that is also a document that is open to adaptation from the co-op sector. So I am happy to send a copy of that because what has been sent to finance, I am sure will evolve and grow. Like my goal is just to first, my goal is to get these things into a budget and then also build the implementation plans, as I have said. And part of that is also like, what do the guardrails look like? We've already been asked that. We've developed a framework and we can share more for your review.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'd probably definitely take a look at that. That's just like I said, that was just something that I was thinking of as we were talking through it. So I appreciate
Absolutely.
the work you're doing. And yeah, if you can send that off or let me know where to get it, that'd be great.
Yes, Suzanne, I can connect. I have Cody's email, so I can connect you after the fact. Um, and then we do have a question from Chris here in our Q&A, which is it says RRSP and TFSA investment transfers to support community capital projects has been challenging. Both my financial advisors were not up to speed on the transfer versus withdrawal options to invest in community capital. Are there resources to point investors and their respective investment advisors to learn more about this nuanced social investment opportunity and not find the lack of confidence a barrier to investing?
A great question, Chris. Honestly, like there are two pieces of implementation on the RSP TFSA side that we are going to be tackling. One is legislative, and then the other side are the trustees of the registered accounts themselves, right? Right now, CWCF is one of the few organizations that will actually enable people to uh, put their community bonds, co-op shares, etc., into self-directed registered accounts. And that continues to be a challenge of like, but then like privately, we've also heard of, there are wealth advisors at like one of the big six that for very particular clients will enable the systems to put them in, right? So a key piece of work that I am doing right now is interviewing many of these financial advisors, helping us to, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand if you were putting these investments into your into registered accounts, but you're not doing it now, what stopped? I know some things around uh IROC now zero legislation that changed some of that. So we'll be talking to them about that, and we'll be talking about familiarity, etc., because this is a kind of key thing that is not just simply you're not it's not just simply about not letting investors place. That's the first barrier. But then if they do, it's also high process costs, high fees that fundamentally eat into the returns, right? So like if you're getting a 3% return on like say a community bond or or like that's kind of like the payout from an equity share, oftentimes those things are getting eaten up by fees and like how do we continuously reduce that? So an ongoing process of discovery, etc., because that's the next part of implementation. And I'm planning for it now because I need to get the financial institutions and like brokerages on board as well. And so that's a piece of that is an active piece of not policy, but operational implementation work that I'm starting now. So stay tuned, unfortunately, is the end result of that entire spiel.
All right, those were the outstanding questions I have. We had some comments sort of during your discussion with Marc Andre that I can bring it back if we want to go back to that. But before that, I want to say, does anyone else have any other questions? Happy to read them aloud for you or do that. If not, I can bring it back to that discussion. I just wanted to make sure we had everyone's questions answered before I um, reopened that one. Oh, here. Oh, just a thank you. So I guess I can bring it back to the discussion you were having with Mark Andre around the 90% rule. And one of the things that someone wrote in the chat was, what about keeping a limit but like changing it, so dropping it from 90 to 55%? And then someone else wrote, interesting discussion, but how do we move people to not only look at charitable giving, but towards impact investing as a way to reach goals that match their values? So
Yeah.
two sort of like comments on the broader discussion.
Um, Yeah, so like to me, I I am open to keeping a limit and changing it. I will discuss it with also like our co-op constituency within the coalition, which is also a reminder. Please feel free to join the coalition as a supporting member, because we do have these discussions um and I will say I've been hearing from a limited number of cooperatives and would love to hear from more on this piece of like, does this fundamentally make sense? And if so, how do we implement it? I'm sure the government would not be opposed to being like 90% 55. Um, like, like I think like amendment deletions, like the core thing about this is that they're looking for low cost uh, legislative changes, etc. This is one of them, so I think they'll be open to it, and I'm certainly open to continue building good governance within our policies because I really do agree with Marc-Andre that unintended consequences of policies is something we actually need to consider as we're building them. So fundamentally, this is core to our decision making, and I think Annie, to your question about looking at charitable giving and more impact investing, my experience has been that oftentimes people don't even know that this is possible. And when they think, and when they talk about like possibilities that align with their values, it's also a question of, oh, doing this is, and this is part of the part of the thing about the tax credit is that we want you to keep your coupon rates low, right? Like we want it to be like lower interest rates, stable return, like stability of returns, and actually centering the financial well-being of the cooperative enterprise so that it lasts for not just 5 years, 10 years, but 50 years, right? Uh, maybe even 100 years, like that kind of generational thinking. And a huge part of it is making sure that capital is right sized and like accessible. So the tax credit, the ability to put uh like like investments into registered accounts, um each of these helps people in Canada. Like these are existing, well, not the tax credit, but like existing mechanisms of saving, etc., and really make it an easy choice. I want this to be an easy choice, um, like for people to continue making to in terms of their investments. And part of it is as we kind of saw with the C. diff legislation, and we can talk about why there aren't as many C. diffs in Nova Scotia as there used to be, and also some of the elite takeover pieces that were possible there, especially around renewable energy. Um, but we did see, like, it did motivate people to go, right, it makes sense for me to leave my capital here in Nova Scotia, in Canada, and in my community. And those are the choices we want people to continue making. Um, and I think that's what will help shift people from just charitable giving to also thinking impact investing and not just simply impact investing, but investing locally into their community for um, for the good and the resilience of their community. And right now we are facing an imagination challenge, and a huge part of it is just getting people to test. So I don't have a perfect answer for you there, but part of these tools help move people to go, okay, that's an easier choice.
All right, thank you. And then Mark Andre is asking for another question. So since I haven't seen any others come through, I'll turn it over to Mark Andre.
Yes, hi, Suzanne. Just one, not to beat a dead horse, but I'm kind of curious if you thought about, with respect to the, removing or raising the limit on outside investment. You thought about the possibility that you might get a single or a small cluster of people who buy, say, the bond. And I had, what kind of motivated this question is I'm thinking of like social impact bonds, in the
Yeah.
past have been funded by one or two big investors who then have a lot of demands, again, reporting demands or other demands. But you can easily imagine a small cluster of people, maybe for greenwashing purposes, saying, I'm putting all this money into co-op housing. Look at me, look how great I am. And then over time, putting pressure on that organization to do things that, they want because they own this debt issue. So I'm just kind of curious about that. Like this is back to that guardrail thing and the insidious way that capital works again. I mean, I've worked at finance, I've worked on Bay Street, I've seen this stuff at the coalface, and I'm just like constantly amazed that like we tend to kind of have a kind of innocence, are drawn to the shiny big dollars and ignore the long sordid history of these things, right? So I'm just kind of curious if you've thought about mapped out those kind of scenarios and like, could a social impact bond work? Could a small cluster of investors happen? What would that look like and how would that play out in this space?
Yes, we did, because this is part of the qualifying community capital framework. Was
Okay.
the thing that was important to us was that we needed in like, once again, one of our concerns is that this will be used to just crowd in one very large retail investor, like a high net worth investor.
Right.
And our goal is that you are actually engaging community. So, in terms of broad-based participation, which I will send this qualifying community capital framework, please feel free. Like, it is in draft form. I've sent it to finance. I'm sure they'll come back with comments. I am I am looking forward to more comments that we can integrate and incorporate into this. Is a minimum of 20 investors. No single community investor may hold more than 50% of the total offering. Total board investment may not exceed 50% of the total offering. And these are initial pieces. Um, and the second piece is that the security must be available to non-accredited investors under a recognized prospectus exemption, because
Mm.
most of us are issuing under some sort of a prospectus exemption. Um, yeah, there are things like you definitely need more than three board members. You need to be, there needs to be certain things around legal standing, um, like how long you've been in operation for. So you can't just pop up a new co-op and go, hey, we're just taking tax credits and getting a bunch of people. Like, there needs to be an actual demonstration. And this is what Finance Canada actually asked us for. And we've thought about it also in terms of a fund and a portfolio. Now, and this will take a in terms of like fund, like a minimum of 20 investors in a pooled vehicle, no single investor on the intermediary's own board. Useful for investment co-ops, I think, or management may hold more than 50% of of units. Um, and then, like, for a portfolio, like thinking about a community bond issuer, no single underlying issuer or project may represent more than 30% of the total deployed capital, and things like that.
Mm.
If you
Where
have
would
stuff
that live?
like this,
Where would that live, Suzanne? Would that be a bulletin, a CRA guidance, or
yes, yes. So there will
okay?
be additional like I've already told finance this is like, look, you are going to need to provide like a like guidance on, and you yourselves need to understand, because that was one of the first questions they asked me, is like, how do we know what is legitimate use and what is not? And so, like, the accreditation part of our recommendation, this is where an accreditation framework for community capital would then live, right? um yes, because sorry, I want to almost answer Colleen's question, but then, so we're creating some definitions, some eligibility frameworks, some thresholds under that, um, things around non-extractive financial design for tools and organizations, and accountability. The one thing is where is like part of what we also need the government to do is choose a home. I'm hoping it's Finance Canada, or I said for something like this for longevity. But yeah, like they wanted us to think about it first and then come back to them. So I built them a framework that will always use a little more, that could always use more input and feedback. Like I'm sure they will have questions and feedback. So happy to mitigate some of that by additional thinkers.
Great, thank you.
And Colleen, to your question, yes, an OM would still be required, and then offered via an EMD. This framework is not around how securities get issued, right? It is a security gets issued, does it count as community capital? Right? So the security issuance is all under provincial jurisdiction. I do not want to touch that, and the feds don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. But what they can do is go, okay, this is a co-op, this is a community bond issuer that says they have issued this. Does it meet these criteria? And I have told them that I think they should take sector-led criteria. So hence why I've taken the first jot at writing this. I shouldn't be the only one writing it. So I'm happy to take more feedback, as always. And I can send this, once again, I'll send a copy and then incorporate further feedback and go, hey, we've heard from some more constituents as, okay, I'm just designating you guys as new constituents of the coalition. But if you have feedback, like send it in. And if there's specific things on co-ops that you want incorporated, I tell me. I want this to be as robust a framework as possible, and I want us as a sector to lead it rather than the government writing it. Not that I don't trust governments, I just think we understand ourselves well, and we understand the challenges, so it's better when it comes from us. Anyway, I'll pause there.
Yeah, thank you so much. We are at time, so I really appreciate all of the thoughtful engagement and everyone for unmuting and joining the conversation. As Suzanne was wrapping up, I was going to go ahead. I will put my email in the chat, and I have the ability to access others' emails, so I can help connect you to others if you're interested. Otherwise, you can get in contact with Suzanne the same way I did by writing a comment form on their website, which I sent earlier. And that is also, she added her her email in the chat as well. So however, but you can also just send an email to me if you need to, and I can get you in touch with the right people. Otherwise, I will leave it for any final questions. So yeah, otherwise, thank you all so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.